you grow up thinking it's the people on the other side of the tracks that this happens to, or these parents must have done something terrible to their children. How could their children do this? Because you don't understand it. And you really can't believe that it would happen to you. And we went to church every Sunday. My kids played sports. We had a decent house. They're outside of, like, looking in, it didn't look like there could be anything wrong. We looked like normal people. And I mean, for the most part, we were. But things happen, and you don't ever know what people are dealing with. You know, it's not what they put on Facebook. It's what's really happening in the home. And you can't blame it on the parents. Our children have minds of their own, and especially as teenagers, they're going to do what they want to do at a certain point. And so you only have so much control and influence over that. So the stigma with addiction is that it's a dirty, ugly thing, and it's bad people making bad choices. And we can argue it may start with a choice, but it's not always about a choice by the end.
Do you ever wonder where God is at when life is flipped upside down? I'm Sherry, your host, and I created this podcast so that my guests and I could look at the good God we profess through the lens of pain and suffering. What I have learned both firsthand and through the personal stories of my guests is that the God of the Holy Bible speaks beautiful things in the dark. God invites us to give him our pain because he's the only one who can transform the very thing that was meant to destroy us. Our challenge is to trust him in the process so that we might come to understand who he really is versus who we think he should be. Listen in and discover the countless ways in which we can find God in our pain. As my guest Janelle Martin shares, addiction affects normal people. And I personally think that there is no boundary that addiction won't cross, mainly because when we use a substance to alleviate pain or find escape, dull our feelings, plain and simple, it works. And we return to what works. Janelle learned this, addiction affects normal people, and countless other things associated with addiction when it came to light that her daughter Regan was using in order to cope with parental heartbreak, trauma, and the overwhelm that it brought to her life. Janelle's journey through addiction from the parent's perspective began with fear and grief and the heavy stigma that so often hushes families. She grew up believing addiction happened to other people until it shattered her own home. And what followed was a crash course in letting go, setting hard boundaries, and grieving the loss of shared memories and milestones. And specifically for her senior year, because that's when it all came to a head and it all fell apart. So she didn't get to go to the prom. Reagan didn't get to go to the prom. She didn't graduate with her class, and nor did she get to enjoy all the ways that celebration culminates after 12 years of dedicating yourself to school. Janette found herself missing the simple joy of normal. A turning point came through community. While Reagan entered a long-term adolescent recovery program in Arizona, Janelle found that this recovery program also had a parent group that met weekly. There is such an incredible value in finding people who understand you without having to explain anything. Encouraged to work her own recovery, she got a sponsor and worked the 12 steps, not because Janelle had a substance problem, but her greatest desire was to see her daughter healed and whole. So this was how she could meet her daughter in what she was going through. The 12-step process unexpectedly transformed Janelle's life. Faith sustained her. She cried out to the Lord, tearfully lamenting in her car. At work, she'd be the only one in the office, and she would play worship music and she would cry. She'd take long walks with Beth Moore's teachings in her earbuds, and she would cry. She found strength, provision, and practical help in places only God could have orchestrated. As an example, she knew nothing about how to address addiction, and she certainly knew nothing about how to begin recovery. And yet, from a random Google search, she found the perfect facility and was matched with the right counselor that could work with her daughter in a productive way. Also, being able to afford her daughter's treatment and the opportunity to travel to see her a few times. Funds that were already drained from the divorce and custody battle somehow stretched. Provision met her every step of the way. Today, Janelle leads meetings for her group, Parents of Addicted Loved Ones. She offers resources and encouragement to families who feel alone, and her message is simple and liberating. Addiction happens to ordinary families. You didn't cause it, you can't cure it, but you don't have to walk it alone. If addiction has touched your home or the home of someone you love, there is help and hope for the journey. You're not alone, mainly because Jesus has promised to never leave you nor forsake you. But he also gives us tangible resources and people who have walked the road we may find ourselves on, and they're ready to lock arms, comfort, and lead when possible. Let's listen in to discover Janelle's story and how this has changed not only her life, but because of what she's been through and the passion that she has to help others, she's changing the lives of countless parents and their families. How would it make you feel if you could affordably, effortlessly, and consistently support your family, friends, and loved ones who are in a season of loss and uncertainty? Can you imagine what a lifeline that is? Letting the brokenhearted know that they're not alone in their pain? Simply knowing that someone cares gives hope for a better tomorrow, courage for the next step, and strength for the next breath. Sealed with a Hug exists as the affordable, consistent, and effortless way to create ongoing support between those who are in a season of loss and uncertainty and those who want to let them know that they're not alone in their pain. Visit sealedwithahug.com to get more information on the monthly subscription box that delivers hope and your hug one box at a time. Be the one who stays when everyone else has left. Thank you for your courage to sit with me and have this conversation about the topic of addiction, specifically how your daughter's addiction journey affected you. So, again, I'm happy to have you here and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sherry. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today.
Thank you. And we hear about the recovery journey from someone who's been in active addiction, but we rarely hear the story from the perspective of those who love them and how it takes their toll on them. And even more rare is hearing both perspectives, but you've made that possible in your book, Losing Her, Finding Us. What is the purpose of your book?
It is the book that I needed when I was in the darkest places in the beginning of my journey with my daughter's drug addiction. I came from a place of not knowing anything and trying to educate myself as much as I could. And you have the books that sort of give you the step by step what you should, shouldn't do, whatever. I wanted stories. I needed to know that there were other people out there like me that had maybe some of the similar feelings or thoughts, and I needed support in that way. And so I read a lot of books, but the only books that I seemed to find were either written by the person with the substance use disorder or by the parent or loved one. And my question in my head reading those books was always, okay, well, what was the parent doing while you were doing this and experiencing this? Or, okay, well, what was your child doing when this was affecting you this way? And so I set out to write the book that I needed that had both perspectives in the same story so that I could provide a clearer picture for people out there as to I guess the compare and contrast like how we experience the same things but differently. Some of the same, but a lot differently, and maybe give some insight to other parents out there who are walking a similar path and offer them, hope, but also that they're not alone, that these feelings and this fear and the thoughts that go through our mind about being a bad parent, what did we do to our children? How do we help them? We should be doing everything we can to fix this, and all of the things are normal, and we all think them and we've all felt that way. And so I just felt like it was important because it was what I needed. So I wanted to give it to somebody like me.
And what a valuable tool, because I know parents are trying to guess. And I'm not saying every child is like Regan, your daughter's name is Regan, is like Regan or whatever, but it gives them some insight to what is going on in the mind of the child. And because we are looking at addiction through a parent child relationship. And
Right.
so, how valuable is that for them to get that glimpse of what their child might be experiencing and going through? You
Right.
just made mention of, you wanted to see what other moms were going through and what they were feeling. Did you ever have any feelings that made you feel horrible as a mother, but yet they were real for you? Did somebody ever come along and give you a glimpse into something? You say, you know what? Okay, so I'm normal. I'm glad to hear that. Now let me move past that.
Yes, in fact, that was probably the biggest part of my really saving my life and helping me walk through this journey was meeting other parents. The first time I was given phone numbers of other moms, because my daughter went to treatment in Arizona and I live in Texas. So I was not there physically with her, but this treatment program, it's called the Pathway Program in Phoenix. It's geared toward adolescents and young adults, which I think was just what we needed. But also they had a robust parent program, which consisted of parent involvement, which was tough for me because I wouldn't live there, but they had every Thursday night parent meetings. So while the kids met downstairs, the parents met upstairs. And when I was able to sort of be incorporated in that, and that took meeting other parents, being able to talk to them, and I talked to them over the phone. That was the first time I felt like I could talk to somebody who understood me, even though I didn't understand myself yet. But just to have somebody tell me their story, what they had experienced with their child, it looked so similar, even though it was different with mine, that I felt finally safe
Mm.
and not judged and really just loved by these strangers that I had never met, but just shared this same story with in all our unique ways. But I had one of those moms who offered to phone me into those meetings on Thursday nights.
Mm. What a
And
blessing.
oh my gosh, it changed everything. Just being
Mm.
in the room, even though I was on the phone, I couldn't see anyone, but just hearing them talk and really realizing like these are parents just like me. They're not terrible people. They didn't do this to their children. These are normal families. And I could just really start to relax a little bit and just really revel in that kind of support. I think it's imperative.
So community in that
Yeah.
context through with other parents who understand you, where you don't
Yep.
have to go explaining yourself in detail. You can just show up and pour out if needs, if
Yeah.
necessary.
And you don't have to explain yourself. They already get it.
Now, is that a form of recovery for parents, or is that just a tool to help you guys, find your way through?
It was part of they encourage parents to go dive into recovery right along with their children. And that can be really hard as the person who doesn't have a drug problem or an alcohol problem. We tend to say, it's not my problem, it's their problem. Why do I have to do all of this? And the thought I'm sure ran through my head multiple times, but when I'm trying to meet my child where she's at, I can't have an educated conversation with her if I don't know what she's learning and I don't know anything about recovery, but that's what she's doing and that's my expectation of her is to be in recovery, right? You need to be sober. So I needed to learn about that too, and this program really encouraged, they didn't require it, but they really encouraged parents to do that. So I got a sponsor and I worked through the 12 steps, and that was life-changing. I didn't see that coming. I was doing it because I thought I wanted to have good conversations with my daughter, but it actually ended up changing my life. So I'm grateful, so grateful that they encouraged that. Not all parents did it, but I did. I chose to, and I don't regret that at all. But I think that it's imperative.
I think it sounds a lot like any sort of counseling. Like for me, it would have been grief counseling. And when I finally went, I kept putting it off because I didn't want to hear everybody crying and whining about their loss. I know that sounds cruel, but I couldn't carry the weight of any more of anybody's. And that's what it sounded like to me. I thought of, but when I showed up, I was like, wow, I should have been here a long time ago. It's not that at all. Like there's this
No.
real equipping and opening your eyes. And then I also think about the benefit of you understanding where your daughter's at in the progress of recovery because I know we have our expectations of what recovery looks like. So then we're trying to hold them to those expectations when we're not even in reality with that type of progress. So that's a beautiful gift for parents. Do you know if that's a standard thing when your children go into recovery that their parents are offered that type?
Yeah, it depends because unfortunately, or fortunately, the recovery or the treatment center that we found was geared toward adolescents and young adults. And so parents really had to be incorporated in that, especially if your child's coming in at, as a teenager like mine, your parents need guidance for sure. So they just incorporated it and it was weekly. And this program was 2 to 2.5 years long. So it is a very long-term treatment program, which I mean, we can argue, I think is appropriate.
Mhm.
even for adults, but it's not necessarily feasible for most adults to go into treatment and stay that long. So what we have today is a lot of 30-day programs, which just maybe scratches the surface of what's really, really going on. And those places, most of them will do like a family weekend or where you can come because it's not always your son or daughter. It can be your spouse or, a sister or brother, whatever, a friend. So it's not geared toward parents like my experience was. So, but most of them will incorporate family and they will encourage them to go to meetings like Al-Anon, which are everywhere, or Nar-Anon for Narcotics Anonymous. And so you do have those options out there, but it's hard for people to walk in those doors for the first time, just like you said. Our
Mhm.
expectations of what happens in there are our own fears of walking in there and being judged or somebody thinking bad of us or not understanding things. But it's really beautiful if you can force yourself to do it.
Mhm.
Sometimes it takes more than once to really let your guard down and accept what's happening and really get involved and share and utilize the wisdom that is in those rooms because it
Mhm.
is helpful. And that's what I ultimately ended up doing after my experience was giving back and here I am, counseling and
Yeah.
practicing, giving back to other people. So,
In an incredible way. I know for me, after I finished the grief share, that was the name of the counseling, the grief counseling I went to, it did give me just a better understanding. I'm not saying it made my grief any lighter, but it helped me to understand it better. And it did give me more compassion for others because it was as if I found my way through these different areas. I won't say fully, but yet it lifted the weight of that and then made room for compassion for other people going through what I was going through. And now, the fact that I get to talk to people about this all the time, I have a deep compassion for that.
yeah, it's beautiful. It takes us out of ourselves
Mm.
and because we get so enveloped in ourselves when we're going through something really hard. And so going to a support group meeting takes you out of yourself just a little bit at a time, where you can start to have compassion for other people and you focus less on yourself. And I think that's where healing is.
Mm. It does take courage to heal. I know there's a lot of stigma attached to, say, parents that have children that are going through addiction. What are some of those stigmas that keep people from going to getting help?
Oh my gosh, there's so many and it's so hard because I mean, I had them too. You grow up thinking it's the people on the other side of the tracks that this happens to, or these parents must have done something terrible to their children. How could their children do this? Because you don't understand it. And you can't believe that it would happen to you. And, we went to church every Sunday. My kids played sports. We had a decent house. They're outside of like looking in, it didn't look like there could be anything wrong. We looked like normal people. And I mean, for the most part, we were. But things happen and you don't ever know what people are dealing with you know it's not what they put on Facebook. It's what's really happening in the home. And you can't blame it on the parents. Our children have minds of their own, and especially as teenagers, they're going to do what they want to do at a certain point. And so you only have so much control and influence over that. So the stigma with addiction is that it's a dirty, ugly thing and it's bad people making bad choices.
Mm.
And we can argue it may start with a choice, but it's not always about a choice by the end.
Yeah, becomes a brain altering
Yes.
situation that you're not even talking to your daughter anymore. You're talking to someone who's chemically impaired, if you will.
Yep.
Let me ask this question. I should have asked this question in the beginning, but I got into the book and it just progressed that way. But tell me a little bit about your family prior to Reagan
Mhm.
getting into a situation where she felt like she needed coping skills. And if that's not applicable to her, correct me.
It definitely is. And this is what happens a lot. Not exactly what happened in my family, but some kind of traumatic experience or something that the child just doesn't know how to handle and probably shouldn't have been asked to. So our story starts, her dad, I was married to him for 12 years. So, but toward the end, the relationship was not good. It became abusive. And so I divorced him, and Reagan was 3 when we split. and I think 4 by the time it was finalized. She was very young. She doesn't remember us being together. But she has an older brother who's 2 years older than her as well. And things were okay for a few years, but then I remarried in 2008. So Reagan would have been 8 and her brother was 10. And once I remarried, her dad, their dad, decided at some point that he was going to make my life miserable. He did not like the thought because he had moved out of state, so he wasn't around much. They did visit him, but he did not like the thought of somebody else raising his children. And not that that was his choice or whatever, but he ultimately used my children to get back at me. And the repercussions of that was not that he ruined my life. I refused to allow that, but he did severely damage our children. And in fact, my son and I have been estranged for 9 years. When he turned 18, he left my life, and we've had minimal contact since, very minimal. But my daughter was collateral damage in the whole thing because the real fight was for my ex-husband, their dad, wanted his son. So he was the one. And my daughter grew up in that fight, seeing what was going on. And there was a lot going on. It was ugly. And knowing that her dad didn't care about her. This is how she felt. My dad doesn't care about me. He only cares about my brother. Everything is about my brother. And she gives examples about that in the book. So she does talk about that. And he doesn't love me as much as my brother. And they culminated into in high school. She was eighth, ninth grade. Dad wanted custody of brother because he had just turned 15 and thought that all he had to do was walk in and say he wanted to live with his dad, and the court would say, okay, and then that's how that works. But that's not how it works. And he didn't get custody. And then because he didn't get custody, there's a lot of anger. Reagan never wanted to go live with her dad, and she got blamed for that not being successful. And so her brother then turned on her as well, and she was in high school. And before even all of that started, we didn't know about this until she was in recovery, but she was sexually abused by a neighbor's son that lived next to her dad when she would go visit him when she was about 5. So there was that had happened that we didn't know. And then all of these experiences with the abuse from her dad and me not really sticking up for myself. I knew that there was things going on. I just tried to take the high road, tried not to play into it, not to give it a lot of energy. But that confused her more because she thought we were both lying because I would tell her something that had happened or was going on or how it was going to be, and her dad would give her the opposite
Mm,
story. And so she just never thought either of us cared about her. She just was like, I'm in this world. Nobody cares about me. It's all about my brother. Everybody's always mad at me, no matter what I do. Now my brother hates me. And it just snowballed. And she could not cope.
right.
And I never would have dreamed that drugs would have come into the picture, but I will admit I never knew the depth of her pain either. She hit it well when she needed to. So
Mm.
I knew that there was pain, but I didn't know the depth of it. So
People are good at masking pain. And then, of course, because you can't really mask it but so long, then you have to try to bury it. But it
yes,
doesn't go anywhere. It just waits. It just waits for you to address it.
it does.
Mm.
Does.
Backing up a little bit, you were talking about, bad parents, good parents, and how people, you were alluding to the fact that people see parents based on their children's decisions, and yet they do become adults and they are responsible for their own choices. I had a friend say to me one time, but we were talking about addiction, a good parent is not based on the choices the child makes. A good parent is based on the choices the parent makes. Does that resonate with you?
Yes, absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Please don't blame me for my children's mistakes, and please don't blame my children for my mistakes. It's just blame me for mine. Blame
Right.
them for theirs.
I can only own mine.
Yes, right. Yeah, I can only take responsibility for mine.
Right.
When I think about you two writing the book, what was your biggest surprise that you discovered when writing with your daughter? Was it just her perspective as a whole, or?
Yeah, because originally 5 years ago, we had this idea separately to write this book She was going to write her part, I was going to write mine. We were going to put it together and we were going to do it blindly because I really wanted it to be a full picture and I didn't want to influence hers and I didn't want her to influence mine. But a life happened and I wrote about 5 chapters, but I really didn't know how to publish it. I'm not a writer. This is not my job. So it was like I'm doing all of this and putting this in, and it is hard to revisit a lot of what we experienced. Very emotional. So it got really hard, and I thought, I don't know what's really going to happen to this. And she was busy. She had finally finished high school. She was going to college. She was working. She's like, and she's not a writer either. She's like, Mom, I don't think I can even write it. And I suggested speaking it and so it just never really happened. And then I had an opportunity to finish the book with a publisher. And so I really was still determined that this was the book that needs to be out there. And so I went ahead and wrote the rest of I wrote the whole book basically. And then I went back and interviewed her for each chapter. So at that point, I shared it with her. I would read the chapter and then I would interview her because I wanted her words to be line up with the time frame of each chapter that I had
Mhm.
written, so it made sense to the reader. And so I learned a lot about just having those conversations with her. And we've talked so much over the years. You'd think I knew everything, but I didn't. And with her describing the depth of her pain, I didn't know that she had tried to take her own life at one point. I did not know that. She was very young, and thankfully, I've always been a very natural-minded person. I don't have medications and things in the house, and she couldn't find anything to overdose on.
Okay.
But I learned a lot with those interviews because I transcribed her words word for word for her sections of this book. And she was very raw and she told stories that I hadn't heard before. And so it was really kind of a bonding moment
Mhm.
going through that with her because we had talked a lot in the beginning about our experiences and rebuilding our relationship, but then going back and doing the book was a little bit different. We hadn't done that in a while. So it was fun.
It does take courage to go back and visit a place that was very painful. And then not only that, you're going to pull it all out and expose it, if you will, to strangers, but all for the purpose of helping others. And that's a beautiful process. But I think about how it must, grow intimacy and mutual respect as you each look at it through the lens of the other person. Because as the older I get, the more I'm beginning to understand how important it is for us to not necessarily agree with, but understand where somebody else is coming from. I think
Yes.
that's a very valuable information to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is again part of why I wanted to dive into the recovery part myself, because I wanted to understand her. I clearly didn't. There were things that I missed, things that I didn't understand and I didn't know, and I should have known. I think I wished I had known. And I needed to apologize to her too for things that I wish I had done differently or maybe could have done differently had I known more about what she was going through and we had those hard conversations early on after she got sober. We just sat and talked and tried to put the pieces of our shared experience together because she didn't understand me and I didn't understand her. And those were really amazing times, amazing conversations, lots of tears.
Mm.
But that was the start of rebuilding something out of nothing at that
Yeah.
point.
And God's so good at that, taking nothing and making it something and making it beautiful.
Yes,
It's the one thing I've learned is your future may not look like what you thought it would or what you had planned for it, but with God, it can still be beautiful, just
absolutely.
differently. Yeah.
It's very different. I didn't envision any of this, not any of it.
Well, as parents, we have dreams for our children. We see strengths and weaknesses, and we, naturally will ascribe things to them, roles, bring things out in them. And so when that doesn't happen like we thought it would, that's a grieving process. What are some of the things that you had to grieve, that you had to let go of? What is something you had to put on the altar
I felt
for the
like
Lord?
everything
Mhm.
because when I kicked her out and sent her to go live with her dad, it was the middle of her senior year. So she was gone. She was in treatment by the middle of that last semester, which of school. So she didn't graduate. She didn't go to prom. We didn't know there would ever be college, but you know, all the normal things you think your kid's going to do. You think they're going to graduate, they're going to get to go to prom, you're going to get to take pictures of them, and they're going to celebrate with their friends and all of that. And we didn't get to experience any of that. And it was very raw at the time because it was still new. She had just entered treatment in March, and graduation was like the end of May. So all of my friends were posting about graduation and prom photos and on Facebook, and I every time I saw a picture, it was like a dart, hitting me in the heart that this was not my life. And I didn't know it. I didn't know what the outcome was going to be. We were still very early in just getting treatment. And there had been a severe crisis that had happened prior to that. So all these people being happy about what their kids are achieving and their awards and their colleges they're signing, and they're, yeah, is so hard. I had to mute people on Facebook, not because I wasn't excited for them or happy for them, but because I could not handle seeing it and knowing that those dreams were gone for me, and I didn't know what kind of dreams to even have at that point. I just
Mm,
wanted her to be alive.
right, right. A basic wish, but it's not one that your mind or heart goes to. Like you're beyond that. There's so much more going on, but yet you have to back it down, almost strip everything down to the fact that you just want her to be alive. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there any way that the parents can educate themselves to understand alcohol addiction, signs of it, anything that might help a parent get ahead? Because not only, like you were saying, teenagers are very independent and they're very good at hiding. I know I was as a teenager. So I'm just thinking they can get away with a lot before you even realize.
Oh, for sure. And I think most of us, like for me, I never used drugs in school, and I didn't even drink in high school. So it just wasn't a thing for me. And so my seeing my daughter's progression into darkness, and that was really truly what I saw. I didn't think it was drugs. Like that didn't come to mind. I wouldn't have. Why would you assume that? Maybe others do. I don't know. I was in denial. I did have, her stepdad, my husband, who is a little more disconnected emotionally because she's my kid. And so he was seeing some things that he had suspicions of drugs. I did not want to hear that. I could not hear that, but it ended up being true. And I had to be shown. I know God knew me. He had to show me, and I was sent a photo of her using that clued me in, and that was on July 4th while I was with some friends. And so, had I not gotten that, I think it would have taken us a lot longer to get to the breaking point, and I'm not sure she would be alive today.
Mm,
Her spiral was so fast.
mm,
So, I do think that there are some things that parents can do. I just don't know that if it hasn't affected you, if you're anything like me, I was oblivious to it and I didn't need it. I don't need to know about that because that's not part of my life. And I think that that's the struggle is parents, I think, are afraid of it. Who wouldn't be? It's terrifying to have a child go down that road, or anybody, a husband, a brother, anyone. But I do think if you can educate yourself at least a little bit about what addiction looks like and who it happens to and what recovery might be, then maybe if it does touch you or a friend or even somebody is being touched by it, you might have some words of wisdom to offer instead of the standard, just tell them to stop using, just tell them to stop doing drugs. Like, okay, well, we've all thought of that and done that. That doesn't work, right? But how to be maybe a friend or a support person for somebody would be helpful because when it happens to us, I will tell you, we feel like we are completely alone and we can't talk to anyone. Nobody
mm.
will understand and everybody will judge us. And unfortunately, that is the experience.
Yeah, it is true. I've seen it. Do you think that if you know, because clearly you said you did not know, and especially at 5, what's she going to verbalize? That there's been some trauma of some sort? Do you think even if the family's going through divorce, do the kids need counseling? Is there an edge you can get up on possibly helping them process it so that they don't turn to coping skills?
I mean, yes, I think, my kids were 3 and 5, so
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of counseling I could have gotten for them. And, back then, even then, it wasn't as prevalent as it is today. But I do think teenagers absolutely can benefit, but also you can't make somebody participate in something if they're not willing. And so
Correct.
forcing your children to go to counseling isn't really a great idea. It doesn't work. I didn't force Reagan to go to counseling after she was caught using drugs, but she did go to a counselor. And then, I had a whole educational part of that too, because I didn't know that all counselors don't know about addiction. They don't.
Yeah.
And so I didn't send her to an addiction counselor. I sent her to just a counselor that I knew and liked. And she was able to attend those sessions high. And she quickly figured out that this person didn't know anything about anything and she could do whatever she wanted. So that's what she did. And so that was not helpful at all. I think, I think divorce is traumatic all the way around. It just affects our children, even if we're getting out of a really bad situation, which is what I was trying to do. It's still traumatic for children and it does affect them. And we don't know how they're going to deal with it or cope with it.
Yeah. When you look back and you think about the pure hell that you went through, what was the gift that the Lord gave you in the midst of that pain and suffering?
My upbringing being in church every Sunday, my mom making us go to church even when we didn't want to. I had that foundation. So I drew on that like it was my life. And I learned a lot during that time because there were few people, if any, that I could really talk to that understood. And so I turned inward to Bible study, and I would do Bible studies online by myself while I was sitting at my desk at work. And I filled my world with praise and worship music in the car. The car, I cried a lot in the car going to and from work and praying and clinging to him like with everything I've got because I knew if this happened to my child and I was a hands-on parent, like I was a present parent, that I couldn't fix it. It wasn't going to be in my control to fix it. I needed help and I needed him.
Mm. He can reach places in pain that nobody else can.
Yes.
And he gives us the beauty of his presence. As a matter of fact, that's the biggest takeaway I had going through my valley over the loss of my husband. And so it's the only thing that I ask for now is
Yep.
just make sure, Lord, that I am never separated from your presence.
Yes.
So speaking about his presence, what about his nature or his character most surprised you in the midst of the battle? Did he show up in a way that was unexpected or just in deeper intimacy? What did that look like? How did he attend to you, care for you?
He definitely, looking back, like he put the right people and even the treatment center, like everything was orchestrated, I
Mm,
feel, by him because I knew nothing. I had no basic understanding of anything. And by the time we needed to put her in treatment, I get to Google it. Like I don't know what I'm looking for. I have no idea, but I'm desperate and she's desperate and I want to save her life and I don't know how. And so I'm praying, I'm Googling and God brought me to where she ended up experiencing recovery. And it was to me, the place, no place is perfect, but for her, they saved her life. And this counselor that she ended up with that was as hard-headed, maybe even more as my daughter, which is exactly what she needed. Like
mm,
every step of the way is like divine intervention.
mm,
Even me letting go of my daughter and sending her to live with her dad after everything that her dad had done to us as a family, being able to let her go. I could not have done that without
mm,
him giving me the peace that I needed to do it and to stick with it in the hopes that it was going to save her or change her. But he also showed up later on, like giving me the opportunity financially. Okay, I'm not a rich person. Treatment is expensive. And I don't care where you go, it's expensive. And I didn't have insurance. And her dad didn't keep insurance on her like he was supposed to. So we had to pay for it by with cash, right? And so I didn't the math didn't work on how to make this work. We split it, he shared in the burden of it and so we both paid for it, but it didn't work with my salary And yes, I have a husband, but we had already been through a custody dispute, lawyer fees, and it's like, this is not what he signed up for, was this constant mess with my ex-husband. So I couldn't ask him. I felt like I couldn't ask him to contribute to my daughter's treatment. So I knew it was on me and I was working, but the math didn't work. But I always had money to pay for every month. They let us pay it in payments. And I also had money to go fly to Arizona, stay for the weekend, take her shopping and out to eat and spend time with her. On 4 occasions, I went and spent weekends with her, and I did not suffer financially.
Wow.
I have no explanation other than he made that possible, made that happen.
Amen. I know I've had situations where if God didn't show up, it wasn't going to happen. And then he shows up because it happens. And you're like, wow,
Yeah,
okay. All right. That was awesome. That was amazing. He
he was
does
there.
go ahead of us, though, and put things in place
Yes, ma'am.
before we ever know we need them.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. 100%.
From a mother's perspective, there are some things that just put daggers in your heart, and you've shared several of them. But what is it like for you personally, emotionally, mentally, physically, to try and stay ahead of your daughter's addiction? Because I know you wanted to save her.
I did, but I didn't know how. You know, I don't know if I stayed ahead of it at all. I feel like I was behind the
I
whole time,
think
still going, how can this be happening? How can this be real? I can't even fathom it. And believing her when she pretended everything was fine or when she told me everything was fine, because I wanted to believe that. So I held on to that much more than any of the signs of things being off.
mm,
So I don't think I was good at that.
well, I don't think any parent stays ahead. I think it is an absolute fear-driven, lay everything on the line to save their child,
And
or at
that's
least
what I
that's
did. Yeah, when it's sending her away, like kicking her out and sending her to her dad, I feel like that was probably the biggest, hardest thing that I could have ever done. And I can't even hardly believe I did it.
is that the point where you came to the understanding maybe that you couldn't live for the both of you?
Oh, yeah. And I also came to the understanding that I may have just lost my second child.
Mm. Yeah, because you have to acknowledge really that they could die.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. Or he could convince her, like he did her brother, and that I was not
Mm,
worthy of a relationship.
mm. How did God meet you in that need? Can you put that in words? How God meet? Because a lot of times it's just his presence that brings the peace and then you just recline in it. But can you put into words how God showed you his presence, showed you he was faithful as you are almost denying your daughter? I don't know. That
Yeah.
feels,
I think, I mean, he just loved me through it. And I had always, I mean, I've always been faithful, thankfully. I don't know. I could not have gotten through it without it. But he also gave me, I mean, I had good friends. I had some support people. I was able to talk to a little bit. I know I did retreat inward. I didn't tell a lot of people that she was even gone. Like it just I couldn't have those conversations. But he kept me going somehow. I kept getting up and going to work, even if I cried all the way there. I would go to work and here's another gift. The place that I was working at the time it was a family run business, and they had treated me like family. I mean, I adored them and they were so kind and loving toward me. And I feel like he went ahead and he brought me there, and I didn't want that job. Originally, it's so funny. I didn't want that job. I tried not to get that job, but I got the job. And I'd been there a few years by then and just had fallen in love with them. And I think I look back and go, that's the perfect place that I needed, because I was alone there a lot. I was running two businesses at once and I was there by myself a lot, and I could cry. I could put music on over the speakers in my office and I could listen to praise and worship music and cry and pray during that time, and nobody was there. And then I could interact with people who I knew loved me, like they loved me. I didn't tell them what was going on for a while, but they loved me when I did tell them. It was okay. It was safe.
Yeah. I know praise and worship, God inhabits our praise. And so you'll feel his presence during times like that. And I know prayer is a lifeline. Prayer
Yeah.
moves mountains. Prayers change things, even if that in the atmosphere only at first, but you're moving things with prayers. Did you have any scripture that you held on to in particular? Anyone that resonated with you maybe on a consistent basis or one that spoke to you strongly?
Not scripture at the time, but I had Beth Moore. Do you know who she
Oh
is?
yeah, I sure do.
Beth Moore. She's local for me because I'm in Houston. But
Okay.
she has Bible teachings. After I get home from work, I would walk in my neighborhood and I would put on either praise and worship music, but a lot of times it was her teachings. And she had so many profound words for me. Oh my gosh. And I would transcribe them. And I've posted them on Facebook and stuff. And some of them had to do with, being estranged from my son, but a lot of it applies to just my life at the time. And she was a lifeline for me. I loved listening to her wisdom. She's
Mhm.
amazing.
She is. I learned so much biblically many years ago. I haven't done a Beth Moore study in quite some time, but I don't know, at least 25 years ago, I was listening to her strictly and doing Bible studies and growing and learning so much in the Word. So she's powerful in that regard.
Oh, she's amazing.
When it comes to God's transformative work in our lives, do you feel that an addict can at some point stop referring to themselves as an addict, or is it important to continually refer to themselves as an addict in recovery with regard to the accountability to stay successful at sobriety? Or maybe it's more about being a beacon of light to others who are suffering.
I mean, I think it's up to the person, I think it's maybe more beneficial to others to be able to say I'm an addict in recovery, or I suffered, with addiction, or I used to be an addict, because really you always are. But if you're in recovery, you can say you're in remission. And I think that that gives people the hope that, oh, you can change. I love hearing when somebody says, I've been sober for 40 years. Like, wow, that is so incredible. So I think there's a lot of power in going ahead and owning that, whether you are actively still going to meetings or doing whatever you were doing when you first got sober or not. It's a it's quite an achievement to be sober and stay sober in this culture, and especially if you're young. And so I think that you can really influence people by owning it. But I don't think you have to refer to yourself as an addict all the time, because really you're not anymore. Like, you're not
Right.
living that life. And addict has some negative connotation to it, so people will think, maybe negatively, but when you show that, you have overcome that, it is powerful.
I will never get tired of the underdog being the overcomer. I follow several addiction profiles on Facebook and Instagram simply because I love the stories. I love to hear that somebody came back from something that they were not supposed to survive, because I believe that addiction is demonic because it just is so hard to get out from under. And I've never struggled with an addiction, and nor has my children ever. I'm not saying they've never used or anything like that. I don't know. It just never became a problem. It didn't come to the surface. But I do have a large family, and so there is addiction in the family. But I will never tire of seeing someone overcome that through the grace of God, and looking at how God takes a pile of ashes and dust and dirt of what used to resemble your life and then put it all back together. But of course, in his hands, a pile of dust and dirt is a completely different thing, right?
Absolutely.
Let's switch gears a little bit. Tell us about how the readers can use your book. What is the benefit of using your book? And then talk to me about these support groups and what you do now in order to help other families.
Yeah, I wrote the book for parents like me, but I will tell you, it reads like a fiction book. It's a quick read. People can't put it down. This is the feedback I'm hearing. So I feel like it could be somewhat entertaining for somebody who doesn't actually have addiction in their, personal life or with anybody they love, but also it elicits a lot of emotion. It's a hard story. It's very raw, it's very open, it's very emotional, but it has a happy ending. So I like to follow up with that. Like, it's a hope story too, but it can teach you a lot about just the process of going through addiction with somebody you love. And also, if you're struggling, I think it's valuable for that too, because you get to hear what Regan was going through, and maybe you can resonate with how she felt and the things that she was experiencing and how she overcame. So I think that there's a lot from it, actually, even if you're not a parent of a child that suffers with addiction. I hope that people will read it and take away something that gives them the tools or the proclivity to not look at somebody who is experiencing addiction as that they did something wrong, or that they must have caused it, or that something was going on with them or whatever. I don't like the negativity and the judgment that comes along with it. So I'm hopeful that the person reading it will have some compassion and be able to be a friend or a support person for somebody in their life that may be needing that and struggling to find it. The book was not written as a blueprint to tell you exactly what to do to help your child. There is no one size fits all when it comes to that, but I do think that there's some nuggets in there that maybe will help with boundary setting or making hard choices or hard decisions when it comes to how to help your child. I give resources and things in there too that may be helpful, maybe not, but hopefully, give you a starting point. It's your own journey to go through. So whatever works for you is going to work for you.
It sounds like it works on both sides of the equation. If you've got someone who's struggling with addiction and it gives them an insight to what the parent's heart is going through. So that's a huge benefit to both sides of the equation as far as who might be the readers of your book, who it would appeal to. So there's another jewel there.
Yeah, it was written for parents, but I think there's value for a lot of people. And also I work with parents every week. I started Parents of Addicted Loved Ones groups here about 6 or 7 years ago. I brought the first meetings to Houston because that was something that was so valuable to me in my recovery and understanding addiction and how to deal with my own child. So I started those meetings, and they go on Wednesday nights here at 7 p.m. and they're always free. Every time I think I need to stop doing this, it's a late night for me or whatever, but I love meeting with these parents and helping them take their hand a little bit, and because they come in and they're so sad and they're so confused and they just don't know what they're doing, and then giving them just a little bit of wisdom and education each week and seeing how it changes their lives just like it changed mine. It keeps me going and I can't let it go. So
Oh,
probably always do it.
I can imagine the payoff is just seeing a glimmer of hope in their eyes.
Love it. I
And
love it.
then,
Moment.
yeah. And then not only getting to speak with you and having that hope and encouragement, but in your book, you said you even share resources. So they don't have to Google stuff. They can come to someone who's already been there, done that, and has forged some ground in that area. So that's got to be priceless as well, if you ask me.
I think so. And I give the resources that really resonated and helped with me. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, we're almost out of time, but before I leave, how can they find you real quick if they're doing the audio and they don't have a chance to look at the show notes? How can they find you?
you can find me on my website. My author website is ourbeautifulrecovery.com. And I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. Instagram is Our Beautiful Recovery, and Facebook is Janelle Martin Author. So those are the places that I am. And you can find links to order my book on my website. You can also find it on Amazon.
Let me part with this question. What is the one takeaway? If the listeners remember nothing else, what do you want their takeaway to be today?
That that addiction happens to normal people, everyday people just like you. We are no different. We have families. We love our children. We didn't do this to them. Everybody goes through really hard things, and sometimes we just don't understand, what they do to cope. But I hope the takeaway is to read the book, learn a little bit, learn how to be compassionate, learn how to be a support person for somebody if it's not touched your life, or read the book and help your child recover or your loved one recover in the ways that maybe I touch on in the book, or find support, because it was my lifeline. Find support groups. Al-Anon is out there. Celebrate Recovery is out there. Parents of Addicted Loved Ones is out there. There's all kinds of people waiting to take your hand and help you through it if you just let them.
Mm. Well, I think even if they lock arms with you, be it temporary or whatnot, just to get their feet on the ground and get some sort of orientation, if you will, to orient themselves to what's going on and how their life is in this tumble, this free fall. Even if they just look to you, get your book, join your group, and get some common minded people around you, and then start to look at the different options. Get some hope. I guess that's what I'm saying is grab a hold of some hope,
Yes.
and then you can find your way through where you need to go. Well, Janelle, you have been wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, your energy, your insight, your tips and suggestions, all powerful and full of hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. This is fun.
Thank you for your time and for sharing this experience with my guest. I hope you have found encouragement for today and a deeper revelation of God's heart in the midst of pain and suffering. We'd love to have you as a subscriber to Finding God in Our Pain so that you can be connected with all my guests as they share their personal experiences and professional knowledge about pain and suffering. And because this podcast is a division of the website A Life of Thrive, for more information and the various ways you can connect with us, please visit the website alifeofthrive.com. I look forward to sharing more transparent stories from the hearts of women who intimately know what it means to have their world flipped upside down, their authentic struggle to make sense of it, and what recovery and healing looks like. Till then, sweet woman, remember you are not alone and that God speaks the most beautiful things in the dark.